Peach Pundit, the podcast, is a conversation filled with the personal opinions of the people who are participating. Any view or opinion expressed belongs only to the person who expressed it and not with anyone with whom that person is professionally affiliated. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for another Peach Pundit, the podcast. Got a text about 3 o'clock this afternoon from a state representative saying, "Where is my podcast?" I was like, dude, we record at 5:30 on Wednesday nights. You know this. You've been listening for years. So to that state representative, here's your first laugh. We're talking to you directly. Here it is. I hope you're happy with it. Geez, get off our backs. Tonight, we are in a very special episode. I have my friend Cole Muzio here. Cole is the head of a very important organization called Frontline Policy.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. I mistyped it in the agenda, but Frontline Policy Council. And I've gotten to know Cole over the years. He launched the Family Policy Alliance in Georgia back in 2017, and then decided to start Frontline Policy Council on his own. And Frontline is really an important organization because it acts sort of like a hub here in Georgia for a network of groups that are working on the social conservative beat. Things like the heartbeat bill, training candidates, and Cole's been right in the middle of all that. So I'd like to introduce him, and I guess it would be appropriate to say he's filling in for Buzz this week because Buzz is at State Policy Network because conservatives are concerned about ideas, and he's over there working on those. So thank you for filling in for Buzz.
Well, when I wrote down my New Year's resolutions this year, at the top of my list was to be able to play Buzz Brockway on TV. So, I guess this is as close as I can.
Yeah, I can see Buzz being honored by that. Yeah. Buzz is a very happy, smiley faced dude.
Yeah,
and to be, you're not an ugly dude yourself, so I'd imagine he would appreciate you playing the role of Buzz Brockway.
I'm not as handsome as Buzz, but it's just it's an honor to try to fill in for Buzz Brockway, and it's always great to talk with you, Scott. You referenced the heartbeat bill. One of my greatest memories that I have since doing this is obviously heartbeat was a big win, but I still have that picture saved on my phone of Ed Setzler debating the issue from the well. And all these Democrats and pro-aborts are irate in the chamber. They're standing up, putting their backs to him. And you just had the decency, courage, humility, friendship, camaraderie, principles that you just felt compelled to stand up and show Ed your respect. And I took a picture in that moment. It's a moment that every year when that pops up, it makes me smile because it speaks to the kind of man that you are.
That's very kind of you. We're going to pause and take a quick break so I can cry some. I got goosebumps. That's a real story that you just told for people who don't know. When Ed Setzler went to the well, there's a reason why sometimes on the podcast, I wear a t-shirt with Ed Setzler's face on it. Ed is one of my personal heroes. And the way he was treated by the Democrats that day was beyond disrespectful. I felt compelled to stand in support of my friend. Yeah. And I just stood there to honor him.
Yeah.
And
it says a lot about who you are, man. It really does.
Well, I don't know if it says much about me or just the theatrics that can happen in a legislative session over important issues. They don't realize, maybe they did realize just how disrespectful they were being, because I've talked to enough of them now to know that they felt like they were disrespected by us bringing the issue. But that's a whole story that we're going to get into a little bit, because we're going to talk about the heartbeat bill because one of the candidates sort of fumbled his way through that in a little bit. For the agenda tonight, what you can expect to hear from us in Buzz's absence is a little bit more about Cole and his work. We're going to talk about Derek Dooley and the heartbeat bill because that made news this week. We had a special election in Senate District 21, and those election results are in. Surprising no one. We're going to a runoff, but we're going to talk about some of the aspects of that. Get Cole's perspective too. The Fulton County Commissioners have adopted the Catoosa County Republican Party's view of court orders, and there were some developments about that story today, so we'll bring you up to speed. And then we're going to wade into things that we don't usually do because I find them sort of click baity. And we're going to talk about Cracker Barrel because why not? Everybody else is. We'll join the crowd for once.
And now I'm hungry.
We'll go to Waffle House then. We're going to pick up all that conversation on the backside of this quick break. Americans for Prosperity Georgia champions economic freedom and individual liberty across the state. They advocate for lower taxes, less government spending, and regulatory reform while mobilizing citizens to engage in the legislative process. Beyond economic issues, AFP Georgia is committed to more choice in K-12 education for all students and removing government barriers and healthcare like Certificate of Need. You can learn more about Americans for Prosperity by visiting ga.americansforprosperity.org. You can sign up for their events, get plugged in, and learn how you can be a more effective advocate for the conservative cause in our state. Thank you to our friends at Americans for Prosperity for being a partner level Patreon. If you too would like to be a Patreon, our tiers start as little as $5 per month. Everybody who is a Patreon and gives us a little bit of money every month gets access to our Pete Hegseth-inspired Signal chat, which today was on fire with commentary about the SD21 race and also some other things. They're just kind of funny. So come and be part of that community. Visit patreon.com/peachpundit. Sign up for one of those tiers. We're appreciative of all of our Patreons.
Peach Pundit has an anonymous Patreon who would like to invite you to learn more about the Alzheimer's Association. The Alzheimer's Association leads the way to end Alzheimer's and all other dementia by accelerating global research, driving risk reduction and early detection, and maximizing quality care and support. No one should fight Alzheimer's alone. With your help, no one will. Learn more on their website, alz.org.
So Cole, Frontline, tell us a little bit about it. I think our audience probably already knows our audience is the Gold Dome, but tell us, what have you been up to? What can we expect? What are the issues that you're looking forward to heading into 2026?
Yeah, we're a Christian organization. We focus on public policy, political leadership, and the culture. Right now, we engage at the Capitol from a policy perspective. We're obviously very involved in elections as we look at 2026 and beyond. We have our Church Ambassador Network, which connects shepherds of God's church with shepherds of government, and really trying to bring the church to bear in a God-honoring way. And then we're also in the process of launching a training initiative for rising young leaders, ages 20 to 25. That we're hoping to equip to be future statesmen across our state. So those are the four main things we do. This last legislative session, really focused on the Riley Gaines Act, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. Those were huge wins. Last 2 years combined, we've got 45 bills that we've endorsed get signed into law by the governor. Obviously, we're looking heavily at this upcoming election cycle. And as part of that, we do have 2 galas coming up and would love to have the Peach Pundit audience there. We've got one September 8th in Macon. Scott Jennings is our keynote speaker, so he will take a break from destroying Jeff Duncan on CNN for an evening and come join us. And then September 11th, which I was really dumb. I've done some dumb things in my life, but I put both of these galas in the same week, which is probably one of the dumbest things I've ever done. But we've got one September 11th, which is that Thursday at the Atlanta Athletic Club. And the greatest basketball coach of all time, Coach Bruce Pearl, is our keynote speaker.
Both of
these events will have a lot of statewide candidates, office holders. It's going to be the can't miss event. You got to be there. You can check out www.frontlinegala.com to get tickets. I got to see if I can talk the Scott Turner into coming, but it'll be a fun event, and hope folks show up.
I've heard great things about your galas, and Scott Jennings definitely would be a compelling. You had somebody I really liked, Ben Sass.
Yeah, I've had Ben Sass, so we don't shy away from, I got a lot of angry messages over having Ben Sass, so we don't shy away from folks.
Why is that? Why would anybody be angry over Ben Sass?
It was a Trump dynamic of never Trumper or whatever. But, my goal with our speakers is we're looking for conservative, principled thought leaders. And I don't have to agree with everything they've said about a person, but I'm looking for something that, gets to somebody's heart. And so I thought Ben Sass was a good especially at that point in time when, anti-Semitism was at the rise on campuses. He was president of the University of Florida. and I thought really was the leading voice around the country for how do we push back on this, and was very, very clear. Very smart guy. And then, Scott is obviously very pro-Trump, and does a great job defending a conservative agenda on CNN, and really taking it to the left. And again, we need more thought leadership in our movement. We need smart, savvy, thinking people that kind of shape how people think. And I think that's one of the things you do with this podcast. You and Buzz are some of the brightest people that I know. Really try to shape give people information, but sometimes challenge what people may think. And so that's one of the things I appreciate about both you guys.
Well, I think Buzz and I share an evidence-based outcome approach, right? We look at policy through what's happening now. What does the evidence tell us? And beyond just trying to win an election, we're free of that now. We're free of having to try to message to folks in a way to get them to vote for us. Which, not that every elected official is like this, but they get mired into, okay, or they start to worry, is this going to hurt me in a primary? Is my general election opponent going to use this against me? And they start getting wrapped around the axle, viewing their voting record through an election, their own reelection bid. And when you're not subject to that anymore, you're free to say, okay, look, there are some things that we do are good, some things that we do are bad, but here's the whole story. Make up your own mind. But here's where the evidence has led us. With that, one quick note about Ben Sass. He's written this book that I made my children read. I have a 20-year-old now, but he was a teenager when I made him read it. And my teenage daughter also has read it, called Them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a story about how the current political environment is set to polarize us and set us against one another. And how do we overcome that polarization? And he advocates for getting involved in your local communities is one of those things. And I really wanted to take the message of that book and press it on my children. So I actually made them read it. And then we had a group book club discussion about it. I really admire him. So it was a good get on your part.
Yeah.
But what I think both you and I would view the heartbeat bill here in Georgia as a huge policy win. But the heartbeat bill continues to be in the news, if only because the governor's pick for the U.S. Senate, and when I say the governor, we're talking about the most popular political figure in Georgia currently, Brian Kemp, has put his full weight and endorsement behind his longtime friend, Derek Dooley. But Derek Dooley went on AJC's podcast this week and did an interview with the AJC's Greg Bluestein, where I'm not going to sugarcoat it. And I'm going to use a really bad pun. He fumbled the ball. When he sat down, he decided to really wrap himself up in the Trump platform, which I think any candidate right now, it's perfectly okay for them to be doing that at this point, especially for folks that are just getting introduced to somebody like Derek Dooley. He'd never run for public office before. It was his quote about the heartbeat bill that is causing a lot of concern amongst conservative activists in our state. And it was a quote that he said something along the lines, I'm paraphrasing, that the states should decide abortion and that he would stay out of it. And when asked to expound, would you have supported the heartbeat bill, he refused to answer, essentially. So that type of split the difference answer, it's kind of milquetoast, invites a lot of follow-up questions, especially with Georgia already living under this law. So let's unpack it. Where does that stance help him? And where does it hurt him? And what was your take when you heard Derek Dooley say that?
Man. Yeah, let me I know you threw out the caveat at the beginning, and let me just kind of give you my perspective on the Senate race as a whole real quick before I dive into that. The governor is not only the most popular figure in the state, he is the most politically savvy leader now, probably in the country. I mean, this is a guy who understands what winning looks like and how to forge a winning formula. He's also a guy that the conservative movement in Georgia, myself included, owes a great deal to. So my view on the U.S. Senate race is Derek Dooley is a new candidate. I'm going to give him time to stretch his legs and to show what he's got before I really wade into that race from an endorsement or weighing in perspective. I want the governor, when he said, hey, keep your powder dry, I'll listen to that, and so now the governor's word is not going to be enough to get me to jump on Team Dooley, but the governor saying, keep your powder dry, I will respect that and give Derek every opportunity to earn my support and conservative support over the next several months. And at some point, people have to make decisions, myself and my organization included. But this was not a good step for him towards being able to earn that support. He's a new candidate. People don't know anything about him just yet. And this is really the first time he's gone on record on the life issue. I think it's important to note that the most concerning thing that he said was something along the lines of, I don't know that I'm allowed to have an opinion, or I don't feel like I should have an opinion. To start off an answer like that with, yes, even just a yes, I support the governor and the actions of the legislature, or to start off by, you were talking about, principle, evidence-based, I think was the way that you look at it. The foundation to me for any candidate that I want to support is, what do you believe? Like, what are your principles? What's your worldview? To start off an answer like that and say, look, I'm pro-life, but here, and then if you want to throw in some caveats for the moderates and say, look, let's be real, I'm in a 60 vote Senate, in the modern political environment, there's 0% likelihood that as your United States Senator, I'll be able to vote on a life issue, but I want people to know where I stand. That is not a soundbite that John Ossoff is going to be able to slam somebody with, as you approach a general election, but it lets me know where your heart is. And that's what I think people are looking for, that are giving Derek Dooley an opening. And a lot of people showed the governor great deference and respect, are willing to give Derek Dooley an opening. I want to know what this guy's heart is.
Right.
And I think when your first instinct is, I don't know that I'm allowed to have an opinion, I'm going to duck this question, it's concerning. Is it enough for me to say, look, there's no way I'll ever support this guy, or I'm going to, we're not there yet. But this was definitely a data point that is concerning about his preparedness, where his mindset is, where his worldview is, his confidence in articulating what his worldview is. And I think, to me, more than a policy position, that's what was most concerning about this statement. It was an opportunity to show me where his heart is, what his principles are, what he believes. And to use another analogy, he punted.
Yeah.
I think,
and it wasn't, he muffed the punt. I mean, it wasn't a clean punt. It wasn't a 60-yard punt. He kicked it 10 yards out of bounds.
Yeah, it was bad.
It was bad because during the interview, he was really wrapping himself up in the Trump platform. And that's fine. But Trump sort of also modeled this, if you know anything about Trump's evolution on the abortion issue. But you make this point, and I think it's an important one. There are a lot of different ways you could answer the question. Saying I modeled Donald Trump is one of those ways, because Donald Trump has said it's up to the states. And that's a federalist model. And that is what the Supreme Court ruled in the Dobbs decision. They did not ban abortion in the Dobbs decision. They pushed that back to the state level, which is what our federalist model is. And now the fights move to the states on whether or not each state will adopt something like Georgia's heartbeat law. That's one thing. Another, there's a way of talking about abortion with the media or anybody else. And for me, it's really easy. It's a 3-part. And the first thing is, where do your rights come from? And our founder said, every human being is endowed by their creator with inalienable rights. Well, for us Christians, we think of that as God giving us human beings rights. So our rights come from God. But if you're not a Christian, another way of looking at that is every human being, regardless of your religious belief, has rights. And I think we all, regardless of our religious backgrounds, can agree with that. The second part of that is, what is the appropriate role of government when it comes to our rights? And we have established our government in this country to protect our rights. And so what are your rights? You have the right to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. I'm not making this stuff up, right? Mm-hmm. You've all heard this before. So you have the role of government is to protect our rights. Among your rights are to live, and your rights come to you because you're human. The last question in that is, when do you become human? And that's where the scientific evidence-based viewpoint looks at the earliest stage of human development. A human being is a human from the very beginning, whether it's 6 weeks, 3 months of gestation, 9 months of gestation. that is a human being that has rights, and the government has a responsibility to protect those rights among them to live. That's a really quick and easy way to answer that question if you really want to get into it. But people who don't think about the conservative philosophy, where their heart is, like you said, Cole, they don't understand what is the role of government, especially now with populism sort of being the rage. So where does the power actually lie in our country? Is it with the executive branch? Is it with the legislative branch? Is it with the judiciary? Or is it with the people? Or is it always with the people? And they don't think about these things. And this is one of the reasons why first-time candidates maybe shouldn't run for U.S. Senate. I'm just saying. Any candidates running for office for the very first time is going to stumble through these things early. And to your point, you got to give them grace early while they find their footing. But if I was on that campaign, and I'm not, I would grab him by the face mask and give him a pet talk of, you've got to get your stuff together because you can't have more fumbles like this one. This is going to cost you the game.
He's got time to clarify his position, to articulate a pro-life worldview, pro-life perspective, and what that would mean as a United States senator. He still has time. A couple of points just to make real quick is one, for those that would jump on a bandwagon of criticizing Derek for his comments, and then with the same breath praise Trump with their entire being. You do need to realize that this is somewhat of a consequence of having a relatively ideology-less president in the White House. I mean, if you're trying to get the Trump endorsement, you would sound a lot like Derek Dooley did in this interview. Trump has criticized heartbeat laws. Trump has said this is an issue for the states. That's his position. And I'm grateful when candidates are willing to step away from that position and go, look, people respect you when you believe something.
Right.
And I think, again, just to continue beating a football analogy into the ground, the Kemp playbook from 2022 was he didn't talk about abortion all the time, but when asked, he never shied away from it. It was never, I wish we hadn't done that, or, oh, well, the legislature voted for it, so I signed it. It was, Georgia is a state that values life. And he didn't shy away. And the strong pro-life position of Heartbeat might not poll at 50% +1, but it polls substantially better than the John Ossoff, Stacey Abrams, Keisha Lance Bottom, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris position of abortion on demand, because you believe something and you articulate the value of human beings. And so I think it exposed some problems with Derek Dooley early on. These are correctable problems. This is a smart guy. He's a law school graduate from UVA. There's a reason he's in this race. A lot of people focus on the record at Tennessee, but this is a guy that Nick Saban hired multiple times for his coaching staff. I want to see him step up his game and offer a real conservative campaign, including a real pro-life position. And he's got time, but we're not going to mince words. This was a bad statement that I and others like me won't overlook. This is something he needs to recant, backpedal, reclarify, and articulate an entirely different position.
And the time's running out on that. It's been several days now. By the time this airs Wednesday night, Thursday morning, it'll be 3 or 4 days since he made those comments. And we've given you the model. And we've also given you an out. We've given you grace to the Dooley campaign. Hopefully you listen to this and take us up on some of the advice. And also, it's free advice. It might be exactly worth what you're paying for it. But between Cole and I, we've been around Georgia politics for a minute. So just saying, take it how it's offered, I guess. Last night here in Cherokee County and parts of Fulton, we had a special election to replace Brandon Beach, who is now the United States Treasurer, got tapped by the Trump administration to head on up to D.C. We wish him well. And District 21 race is now heading to a runoff because we had 6 Republicans and 1 Democrat. Mm-hmm. The 6 Republicans combined for over 60% of the vote in that race, 60.5-ish, give or take a few votes. The Democrat ended up at 39.5% in that 7-way race. She was the top vote getter, and Jason Dickerson narrowly defeated Steve West, former county commissioner here in Cherokee County, the Duck Dynasty beard guy, who we broke that race down for you last week. But Jason Dickerson, 65 votes, somewhere in that neighborhood, is what put him into the runoff. That was the difference between him and Steve West. I'm sure there will be a recount.
Mm-hmm.
The way recounts work is certified usually this Friday. Then they have a couple of days to request a recount. They're certainly within their right to do so. And I expect them to actually do a recount on this particular race. I can't imagine that they wouldn't. It would be political malfeasance on behalf of the Steve West's campaign team to not ask for that. But all that said, some of the headlines that framed it as a shock to Republicans in the district. Let's talk about the media coverage. And one of the things I wanted to point out to you, Cole, this was one of the things that just jumped out at me. We talk about from time to time media bias. And I'm going to read to you some of the tweets that came out from the media here in Georgia, because they were, see if you recognize the theme.
Yeah, I noticed this morning as well.
Yeah, this is from the Georgia Recorder. Reporter wrote on her Twitter, the lone Democrat in a 7-way race easily advanced to a runoff in a special election that will decide who to replace Alpharetta Republican State Senator Brandon Beach. Another one for public broadcasting said, with almost all the votes in, this was 19 hours ago, with almost all the votes in the Georgia Senate District 21 special, Democrat Deborah Shigley has 39.5% of the vote in a district where the D got 30% in 2024 and Harris got 32.5%. Another substantial Democratic overperformance that will be decided in a runoff next month. Raul Bali wrote, Democrat Deborah Shigley advances to next month's runoff to replace former GOP Senator Brandon Beach. Greg Bluestein, 19 hours ago, it's me, the one Democrat and 6 very MAGA Republicans, quoting Shigley, told me at a campaign stops a few weeks ago, quote, and we're going to take them by surprise. We're already clearly outworking them, end quote. Now an intense runoff against a well-funded Republican awaits. Bluestein also wrote about the results. In a deep red suburban ATL district, Democrat Deborah Shigley notches roughly 40% of the vote to land in a runoff for state special. He also tweeted 10 hours ago, Democrat Deborah Shigley was easily the top vote getter in the 7-candidate special election scramble, and so on and so forth. What was the common theme that you picked up on watching the media coverage?
It was an obsession with someone who's going to lose in a few weeks.
I'll point out the way that I introed this story was the Republicans combined for over 60% of the vote. And they are enamored with 39.5%. She was the top vote getter. There's no doubt about it. Clearly she was. The 2 second place, third place Republicans behind her came in right around 17% each. So even the 2 of them didn't combine to add up to her total. But that being said, it's 70% Republican district. It's a 60% Cherokee County district. And the Fulton County portion of it did outperform their share of the turnout. They didn't get the majority of the votes, but they did overperform. They make up 40% of it, and they had more than 40% of the votes cast. So this happens in specials from time to time. For those who've been around a minute, the name Janice Van Ness may have a certain ring to it because she was a Republican in Rockdale County in a Democratic-controlled district for years who won a special election, only served 1 year, and was out when the full turnout model was back in play and the Democrats came out in force, and she is no longer in the Georgia Senate. So looking at this, Cole, I was interested in your take because you got to know a little bit about the candidates too. I mean, Frontline would certainly take an interest in who was going to replace Senator Beach. What were some of the things you took away from the race?
I mean, on what you're mentioning specifically on the coverage, I mean, I think 3 things can be true. One, special elections are weird.
Yes.
So, turnout models, all those things you've got to kind of not totally discard them, but you got to take them a little bit with a grain of salt. Number 2, yeah, she will lose coming up. I mean, we're going to spend next several weeks trying to ramp up Republican turnout. We're going to cast this thing as something where people need to get excited and engaged, but she's not going to win. 39.5% is not a winning formula to try to get the nod here. But the third thing is, and this is also true, and it is fair to point out, and Republicans do need to be a little bit nervous about this. You pair this with the PSC race turnout, D to R, as well as some other data points that you're seeing. There is a Democrat enthusiasm gap. There's more enthusiasm, higher turnout on their side that does bode ill for 2026 if Republicans can't get their act together. That said, this was an interesting race to watch because you did have 6 Republicans. It almost went into 2 tiers relatively quickly based on money and expenditures. All the main energy and buzz that I was hearing from day one was Jason Dickerson, Steve West, Brian Will. I got to know a little bit and like Bryce Futch, who I think he's the guy who most significantly outperformed his finances and expectations. Lance Calvert is a very genuine, authentic man of faith, and I really like him. Got to know Stephanie Donegan just a little bit. I know she worked hard and has a bright future, but huge money advantages in the Dickerson, West, and Will camp. All 3 of them ran hard races. Jason put in a lot of money on his own, and that at the end of the day paid off. It was a narrow win over Steve West, who's a guy who's entrenched in Cherokee County. We held a forum. We had about 175 people show up on a Friday night to come to our forum, and I got to hear, especially from Steve and Brian, Jason was not he was not able to attend that one. But Jason's a guy that Steve was a guy that knows a lot about Cherokee County and had a lot of Cherokee County support in that room. And so Jason coming up from outside the political scene, being able to self-fund, obviously won that race. And I think after a while, a lot of the mail and a lot of the money that was spent on the Republican side probably dampened turnout more than ramped it up, because you had so much confusion about 6 different candidates. Everyone's getting 10 mail pieces a day. I think you had a lot of people stay home as a result. But it's time to unite behind Jason. I've gotten to know him a little bit, certainly trust his positions on issues. It's been good to become, his friends. I didn't know him before he announced, but been pleased to get to know him. I think he's got a genuine heart to serve. He's going to be, we're as an organization, we're against gambling expansion. He's been against gambling expansion. He's pro school choice. He's pro life. Checks a lot of boxes. And I do think he's got a genuine desire to serve the community. If you had another candidate that you were enthusiastically behind, do you understand Democrats did overperform expectations? This is not the first time this cycle that they have done so. And if you are hoping to make sure that you've got a conservative Republican state senator from Cherokee County and part of Fulton as well, from SD 21, you've got to get over whatever grievance you have and unite behind Jason, because stakes are high. I mean, this is not a seat that you can afford to lose. I don't think we will lose, but there does need to be unity and enthusiasm over these next several weeks.
Yeah. So I will tell you, I called Jason this morning, and I would have called Steve West if he had been the one. I would have called Bryce Futch if he had been the one to get into the runoff with the Democrat, and said, when do you need me to go knock doors? And I don't live in that district, but we haven't had a state senator in Cherokee County since Chip Rogers left. Brandon Beach won that seat in a special election. He had run against Chip just before that over the summer in a primary. So he didn't even have to buy new signs. He just pulled his signs out of storage and started putting them in the ground, and he was off to the races. He had an advantage over anybody else that was trying to run in that district just on name ID alone. And then we talk about specials being weird. Turnout models are just so strange. You don't know who the voter universe is in these things. This district, the way it's configured currently, it never had a special election before, so you can't even model it after anything. The lines had radically changed in the last reapportionment. But Deborah Shigley raised a lot of money for a Democrat. She raised $140,000 plus dollars. But to your point, a lot of money here. And some of these candidates ended up spending significant portions of their own money. Lance Calvert had spent $125,000 of his own money. He had raised $135,000. Bryce Futch spent almost $50,000 that were not dollars that came out of his own pocket. Brian Wills, $129,000 fundraising number, $100,000 of that was his own money. He talked about gambling a second ago. This is high stakes gambling when you start putting that level of your own money. And Jason Dickerson spending $500,000 and almost not making the runoff. What number? This was a fun exercise we engaged in the Signal chat today. How much money would you have to have, Cole, to feel comfortable stroking a $1,000 check to your own state Senate campaign?
I don't think that's a real question. How much money would I have for my wife to allow me to do that?
This is a question I asked Wes Cantrell yesterday. How much would you have to have? And Wes said if he had $10 million, he thinks $500,000 is a reasonable number for him to put into his own campaign. I said, that's crazy. That's 5% of your total wealth. No,
Yeah.
do not do that. I think there's a diminishing returns. I admire the people who self-fund. I'm not capable of it, so I have to admire them for it. It says a lot to me, and I said this last week on the podcast too. Jason Dickerson had a $100 campaign contribution from somebody, and he returned it, saying, I'm not allowing people to fund my campaign. I'm going to fund it myself. And there's something to that. I think there's a benefit to the voters to say, look, I'm not a trial lawyer guy. I'm not a Georgia chamber guy. No special interest is going to come along and taint how I view these issues. And you can trust that. I don't know how long that will last because it was a $500,000 loan. It wasn't a contribution. That being said, I expect him to up his fundraising at this point. I mean, it would have to. And I expect the Senate caucus and the Burt Jones Leadership PAC to come in and help him as well. And it's not outside the realm of possibility that the Democrat wins here, especially with that enthusiasm gap that you described, but it would be highly unlikely, especially somebody who's this motivated to win this election. They're already pot committed, to use another gambling phrase.
Yeah, and I think, and look, for Jason, I can tell you it's a very genuine conviction that he had. I mean, our organization certainly, I guess the left tries to categorize this as a special interest, and it's funny to hear some of these liberals at the State House talk about how much money that they think we have. I wish I had as much money as they think we have, but yeah, I mean, Jason even said up front as I connected with him, hey, I want to get to know you, but I don't want an endorsement because I'm not accepting endorsements. I'm not accepting contributions. I want to win this thing on my own. Obviously now there's a united front against, Shigley, and I think we'll step in and be able to endorse him at some point. But it was a genuine conviction. And so I've got to applaud that. And certainly now is the moment for unities, Senate caucus, you said Burt Jones Leadership PAC. This is everybody that has a stake in this, which is this high stakes. It needs to weigh in. And I think you're getting a guy who's genuine in his convictions, has a genuine desire to serve, is going to vote with Cherokee and with SD21 on issues. And look, when you have $500,000 to put in and you have that kind of money, you have been successful. And you're getting somebody who is a successful individual who's coming in with ideas and thought processes because he's made his company work, he's generated revenue. And so it's not just, hey, I'm trying to buy a seat. I've earned the capability to put in this kind of resources, and that's something that uniquely qualifies him to be a state senator. So, I think, expectations should be high for him in this campaign. I think he's going to close it out with a W, and looking forward to working with him in the state Senate.
Absolutely. When we come back, we're going to talk about Fulton County Commissioners ignoring court orders and the developments that happened today, as well as the whole Cracker Barrel and maybe a side of Steak and Shake. Stay right there.
Golden Retriever Rescue of Atlanta, GRRA, is an all-volunteer, tax-deductible charitable organization. They are dedicated to providing veterinary care, comprehensive evaluation, and foster and adoptive homes to golden and Labrador retrievers who are abandoned, mistreated, neglected, or left in shelters throughout Georgia. We encourage you to visit their website grra.com and help connect people and dogs that need each other in their lives. You truly can make this world a better place by helping find homes of gold for these golden-hearted pups.
Conservatives Concerned is a network of political and social conservatives who question the alignment of capital punishment with conservative principles and values. Our programs include educating conservatives about the failed death penalty system and mobilizing them to bring about its end. We come to this issue for a variety of reasons. Some believe that small government and the death penalty don't go together, especially when we compare the high costs of capital punishment to life without possibility of release. Some don't trust the state to get it right. We already know that some innocent people have been sentenced to death, and for others, it may already be too late. Some believe that the death penalty contradicts our values about protecting life. Find out more at conservativesconcerned.org.
We're going to take a moment to remind the audience that the merch shop is open at peachpundit.com. If you want to get your snarky political merch, it's there. You can get a Reagan t-shirt. It says "Make Republicans conservative again. That's a pretty cool t-shirt. Mine's on its way. I'll probably have it by the time we podcast next week. We also have the brass rule: treat everybody like they're armed. You can't spell terrorist without FFS. And our most popular t-shirt that has sold the most versions of it is Sorry, Miss Laura, which, if you're out there, Miss Laura, thank you so much for being our number one fan. And I'm sure your family by this time has shown up to whatever family gathering wearing those shirts. Send us pics. I want to see them.
Now, are there T-shirts with your face on them or Buzz Brock? I know you've got an Ed Setzler shirt, but is there a Scott Turner?
The Ed Setzler shirt is not for sale. It was a custom-made shirt I made myself. But if you wanted one, let me know. We'll make that happen.
Okay.
And we offer a certain Patreon level. You get to pick your favorite host of the podcast, and you can get a T-shirt. I do have one with Jason Pye's face on it.
Okay.
It has made appearances whenever Buzz and I are out in public without Jason, so Jason can be with us in spirit, if not in person. I also want to remind the audience about the upcoming fictional dodgeball Politico draft, where we will create a fictional dodgeball league where we will draft various politicos in the Georgia orbit and see who comes up with the best team using the dodgeball movie rules for team rosters. And so spots on that are filling up fast. We only have a couple left. So if you're interested, leave a comment. We also have the merch giveaway comment promotion where randomly I will select at least once a month, maybe more, a comment wherever it is, whether it's on Apple Podcasts or if you listen on YouTube or if you listen on our blog, leave a comment there. Your comment may be selected and you might end up getting a free shirt or hat or something like that out of the shop.
Who all is in the draftable pool of players, just for
anybody at this point that either covers Georgia politics in the media or has run for office and failed or has gotten elected.
Okay.
So that's who it is currently. And this all came out of a conversation Buzz and I had several weeks ago where we were perplexed. Not that we agree with Jeff Duncan on anything anymore, but we were perplexed by Josh McCoon and David Schaefer attacking Jeff Duncan for being a minor league baseball player when neither of us think that we would possibly pick them for our dodgeball team. So it kind of came out of that. And tongue in cheek fun.
So I'm not draftable, and I'm going to choose to believe that I'm not draftable because I would be like a cheat code to victory for your dodgeball.
We haven't decided that finalized yet. So It's possible that we could expand it to the lobbying corps.
Okay.
If somebody makes a good case, I don't see why we wouldn't.
I mean, me.
But I also said if Burt Jones was picking on Jeff Duncan for being a minor league baseball player, that would make more sense because I would pick Burt Jones for my dodgeball team.
Yeah.
Right. You need a tank, right? And there he is. He's right there. Yeah. I mean, some other top picks of mine, Greg Dolezal, I would pick, right? Dimitri Douglas, if I'm going cross partisan, who also was a UGA football player. Dimitri would be on my top 10 list for somebody I would want. But you also need some fast people too, right? And I can't think of anybody who's fast in the Georgia legislature.
Well, you don't get a chance to really observe speed. I think there should be like a combine in January, like before there's gaveling in. I imagine you'd see a lot of 6 and 7s in your 40 times, but you should see what everybody ran.
And also some throwing drills. We want to see the arms. I want to see what you got.
Houston Gaines can move. Houston can probably run.
Yeah, youth and vigor on your side.
Yeah,
with Houston Gaines. Oh boy. So Fulton County, I wrote this piece last week because we've been told for 2 years that democracy's on the ballot. Had you heard that, Cole? Democracy's on the ballot in the 2024 presidential election.
I agreed, and I voted accordingly.
And if right, the irony there is the winner was elected in a fair democratic process. We'll set that aside.
I agreed with the premise, differed with the conclusion that the vote standing that
stick a pin in that factoid, the evidence telling us that the democracy worked the way it was intended in that election. But they told us that if Donald Trump won, it would be lawlessness, that their respect for law in this country would just erode to nothing. And then the Fulton County Commission decided to refuse to obey a court order seating 2 nominees offered by the Fulton County Republican Party for their local election board in Fulton County. And their objection is based around the fact that they think that these folks are election deniers and that they're troublemakers, and they had their whole reason. But the law, the way it is written, says that they shall appoint. Now, I've written extensively at Peach Pundit about the DeLay v. Sutton case and whether or not the parties having the ability to make these appointments is constitutional. That's, I think, an open question. And Fulton County has an opportunity here to test that if they decide to do so in court. But until then, they have to follow the law. And until the Supreme Court overturns that law, which there's precedent that says that they might, they're obligated to follow the court order. Nobody is above following a court order. And then today, the judge in that case told the county commission that he is issuing a civil fine to the county of $10,000 per day and held them in contempt civilly, not criminally. Nobody's going to prison over this because it's the government that's being fined here, that the money cannot go back to the Fulton County government. It has to go to the state coffers, and that there is no limit to how much he will fine them until they comply with his order. And it's important to point out as well that they have appealed the case to the Court of Appeals, and the Court of Appeals has refused to stay the lower court's decision pending that appeal, meaning they are left with no other decision other than to comply. So we have that out of the way. That's the story. What's your take?
I wish I had something smart and nuanced to say, but just follow the stinking rules. In both. I mean, it's not hard. In this case, be fair. Put the Republicans on the commission, and to your point, they chant "Save democracy," "Democracy's on the ballot," all this stuff. But this is the same party with the incumbent president who had an interim tweet while he was napping a revision of the United States Constitution, and he acted like that was okay. This is the guy who just willfully violated every border law that we have as a country. I mean, constitutional principles matter for both parties. And one of the things I respect about people like you, respect about people like Eric Erickson and others is a willingness to look at actions that our side might have and go, that's not constitutional. That's not within the rule of law. That's not obeying court orders, and to be willing to speak out against it. The left doesn't police themselves in that way. And what you're seeing in this Fulton County example is yet another time where those bleeding about democracy are refusing to obey even basic laws and comply with even human decency. I don't have a nuanced, super innovative, thoughtful, smart sounding take. If Buzz were here, I'm sure he would sound a whole lot smarter than me. But just follow the stinking rules. It's not hard. And let's be a country. I mean, that's one of the things that really frustrates me is having 4 kids and looking at the future. The pendulum swings when one side is in power to the other side in power, and the deep partisan divides are not sustainable for this being a United States of America 5 decades from now. We have to get to a place where we're at least willing to respect the other side, obey the laws, be constitutional in our governmental approach, have a good civil outlook on how we engage with one another. Again, I'm one of those that does try to police our own side, and the left just doesn't. They blatantly ignore rules, ignore edicts, ignore the Constitution to advance their own ends, and then cannot ever smell out their own hypocrisy.
I'm going to pick on my own side on this some, because it's not just the left, because we had the Catoosa County Republican Party engage in very similar behavior.
Yeah, but where's you've called that out.
Sure.
Where's the leading voices on the left calling out Fulton?
Well, that's a great point, and one I think is completely valid. But what I'm seeing is an erosion of the institution of law here. Mm-hmm. It's hard for me to see party officials who have issued public statements of support to Catoosa County ignoring a court order. And for those who don't know that story, the Catoosa County Republican Party last year decided they didn't like some people who came forward to run as Republican for county commissioner, and decided they were not going to allow them to qualify and get on the ballot to run for re-election in 2 of the cases and an election for the 3rd. And a judge told them, this is a ministerial role. You shall put them on the ballot. and they refused, and they were held in contempt. And the judge had threatened fines. He eventually alleviated those fines and then ordered the clerk of that county to qualify those candidates and place them on the ballot. But they never complied with the court order. And now you have the same party officials within the GOP saying this is outrageous, and they're making all these incendiary comments about the Fulton County Commission doing the same exact thing. And while you're right, I don't see somebody like us or Eric Erickson on the left calling them out on the left for this. They're sort of celebrating it. Oh, they're keeping the MAGA people out of the local election board. But I also see hypocrisy on our own side when our leading voices are people who celebrate this when our own team does it. And I think when you talk about conservatism, what are you conserving? Why are we conservatives? It's because this beautiful system that we've developed, and we didn't develop it, we inherited it from our ancestors in this country, that separate powers and give us checks and balances. And the rule of law and the role of the judiciary is a vital part of that, because when we have disputes, we have to have a way of peacefully settling those disputes, and that's the role of the court. And if we begin eroding their credibility by simply ignoring them, we're setting ourselves up, to your point, in the future, the rule of law not really mattering. And then that is anarchy, it's chaos. And that's why we are conservatives. We want to conserve this system. And if you are a conservative, you would reject Fulton County's actions here just as much as you would reject Catoosa County's. And I don't expect the left to be conservative about anything. I don't. They've held on to populism over on that side of the ideological spectrum for a really long time. So I'm not making excuses for it. But for us, we also have to keep our own house in order, because it's sort of what we stand for. It's sort of our brand, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And look, even more than anarchy, the thing that as a conservative I would fear more greatly is pure unadulterated power, which is why I don't like the president of the United States, whoever it is in office, using executive orders in a way that was never intended. I certainly don't think Trump has abused it as much as Biden did, but Trump does abuse executive orders, and he has in both terms. And you can say, well, the other side did it, so we've got to do it. But when you cede that kind of legislative authority to a singular person's pen, especially someone who is struggling with, late stages of mental decline, as with the previous president, it is a high risk. And in this case, to look at, the Catoosa example on quote unquote our side, if you communicate to the well-moneyed quote unquote establishment that is out there that, hey, you buy a party GOP, you can decide who can run for office. Guess what? Everybody who has, we just had you talked about some of the self-funding going on for SD 21. You identify big business interests that will put $100,000 behind a local county state chairman's race, that they're sending out texts. They turn out a whole huge audience that may or may not be Republican. They elect a new GOP chairman, and all of a sudden that is your winnowing fuel for who can run for office as a Republican. That's insanity. And that's what will happen if you communicate that a local party unit can have that amount of power. Same thing in Fulton County. If you communicate that your county commission can determine how elections are run solely by who they want to put on the election board, that is way too much power to have. And all of a sudden, money and power will find that avenue. And you'll have, yes, you already do have unfair elections in terms of how things conduct in Fulton County, but you have all the more just absolute dictatorial power in Fulton County, and others that want to abuse it, both on the right and left. Power is a real thing to fear when you're a conservative, and whether it's your side or the other side, you need to do everything that you can to push back on something that denies people the freedom to run, denies people, a fair say in elections, denies Congress the authority that it's supposed to have, the legislature the authority that it's supposed to have, the courts the authority that it's supposed to have. It is why our system works. It's why we're conservatives, because giving somebody who is a flawed sinner absolute power is something that conservatives who understand that sin is a real thing, that absolute power corrupts, that's something that we should fear and react against very strongly. And that's why checks and balances are important across all systems.
What I really fear is if the Catoosa County model and what they wanted to do up there is allowed to continue, the people that are there now think that they're the upstarts, but they are really the establishment.
Mhm.
And you're moving the nomination process away from the people
Mm-hmm.
and into smoke-filled back rooms for deal making on who's going to get a nomination.
Yeah.
And that is the antithesis of everything that we have stood for since this party was created.
Yeah.
And it is so incredibly frustrating to see Republicans do this. But I have to be honest, I'm seeing it escalate because the way I look at it is politics can be a ping pong match where each side is escalating how hard they can hit the ball at the other. And eventually it becomes something that can't be hit. You can't play the game anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And because the tools of the game have been destroyed. And that is a dangerous place we're heading down if we tolerate it. We shouldn't. We just shouldn't.
Yeah. And today it's the grassroots Catoosa GOP, but you give the GOP that sort of the GOP unit that sort of power, it will become the vehicle where the developers or whatever special interest wants to come into Catoosa County, that will be what they buy.
Right.
And money and power find a way to consolidate money and power.
Right. Be careful what you're asking for. Be careful. Last topic of the night. I generally don't care when corporations decide to commit Harry Carey in front of all of us. I didn't have a reaction to the Bud Light fiasco a year or two ago. It's just not something. I don't drink Bud Light. It's never been a beer that I've enjoyed. I don't drink beer very often. When I do, it's not Bud Light. That being said, Cracker Barrel really stepped in it. They decided they were going to take Uncle Herschel, who is the old man on the logo, off the logo. And they were going to undergo this huge remodel, $700 million investment to change their stores from the iconic classic Americana experience that we'd all come to know and enjoy whenever we were road tripping and wanted to stop off for grandpa's special breakfast or some biscuits and gravy. They have some really good pancakes at Cracker Barrel. Ask my son, he'll tell you. But they were starting to sanitize the look of the whole place. The new logo was a barrel tip on its side. It had removed the character, and they had completely misread the national mood of the country, and immediately their stock began to tank after their CEO appeared on a show, on one of the morning shows, and gave an interview about how awesome it was going to be. And she promised there would still be rocking chairs out front and peg games on the table. Well, the American people had different ideas. Almost instantaneously and across the ideological spectrum this time, people said this is a really bad idea. Even the Democratic Party's Twitter account tweeted, "We think this is a really bad idea too." That's not how they reacted to the Bud Light scenario, by the way. But since that story broke, they have since recanted. They rolled back and said, okay, you guys were right. We were wrong. One of the interesting aspects of this is there's a major shareholder of Cracker Barrel who also is a major shareholder of Steak and Shake, who, if you look at the Steak and Shake official Twitter account, it's all about Cracker Barrel right now. Like they have used that account to attack Cracker Barrel, attacking American institutions and nostalgia and change for the change's sake and being woke even. I don't know how logos are woke, but okay. They recanted pretty quickly. The story has come out since then where this one large shareholder, who I think is also the CEO of Steak and Shake, he's a large individual shareholder, had warned the CEO that this rebranding was folly, and the CEO ignored them. I generally, again, I don't usually get into these topics. They're not something I generally care about. But this one with Cracker Barrel, I have fond memories of going into Cracker Barrel, not only as a kid, but also with my own family on road trips. And it's a core memory. And to see it go away is sort of sad. But how powerful is this moment in history where we're no longer putting up with people attacking aspects of our culture that they think are old or outdated, that we're sort of returning to tradition. And in this particular example had nothing to do with like the LGBT stuff. It was just simply trying to clean up the logo and make the stores brighter and less cluttered. But it seemed like across the ideological spectrum, the American people are like, hey, that's a bridge too far.
I think there was some of that undercurrent there, though. I mean, I think the Cracker Barrel's become kind of known for funding LGBTQ pride parades, drag queen story hours, those kinds of things that I think gave a lot of conservative influencers a little bit more motivation to critique the Cracker Barrel rebrand. But I do think it's important. I'm not a huge boycotter, and I'm not usually super loud on these kinds of things. But Target and the Bud. I'm not a big drinker, but the Bud Lights and those kinds of things that are immoral and goes against values. I'm much more likely to speak out against. But I think this just. And by the way, I'm glad we're speaking out on this social media phenomenon as opposed to the last big social media phenomenon of the Coldplay incident,
which we never talked about.
so thank you. But I think this one was just. It's so stupid. Like it is one of those things. Like I tweeted about out that, this is something that will be, I've got an MBA. I don't know what that's worth, but I've got an MBA. Like this is something that's going to be in MBA textbooks. It's just really bad audience awareness. It's the counterpart of, the hyper flamboyant, homosexual male Minnesota Vikings cheerleaders. Like no dude going to an NFL game wants to see that. Nobody coming to Cracker Barrel wants kind of a departure from the iconic, the old, the nostalgic. That's what Cracker Barrel's about. If you're coming to Cracker Barrel, you want to step back in time. You want the Uncle Herschel. You want the store. You want to wonder, why the heck did someone put that on the wall? But hey, it's cool. I mean, that's what you want with Cracker Barrel. And, it just was it was the I know better than you, stupid customer moment that Cracker Barrel had that touched a nerve, because so much of America's reaction has been, I know better than you, stupid voter or stupid media viewer. That was a reaction that we got in 2024 that led to Donald Trump's election, because people have been tired of being told by Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, the Democrat Party, we know better than you. Yeah, a dude can be a woman. You're stupid, you're low class, you're a hit, whatever. And the media trying to push that same lie. Yeah, Joe Biden is really, fully mentally capable. He's sharp as a tack. And yeah, you see him sleeping here on national TV, but just ignore your lying eyes. It was the same sense from Cracker Barrel. We know better than you. You don't know what you want. We know better. And I think that kind of slap in the face is something that consumers, voters, the mass audience is reacting against across the board. And this was, I think, a cool moment from a corporate standpoint where you just go, no, we're not going to take that. Like, this is what I'm coming here for. And if you think you're better than me, then I won't come here. So it's good to see the recantation. Interesting. It's always kind of frustrating when these become such huge cultural moments and everybody's talking about it on social media. But there were some funny memes and gifs along the way that have made this pretty interesting.
It's just interesting to me to see it was universal feedback, and very few people this time defending the Cracker Barrel decision, which I think made it easier for them to backtrack as quickly as they did. But there's a lesson there, I think, in business as well. If you look at the Waffle House, the Babylon Bee had a meme that they posted saying Waffle House issues a radical business plan where they keep the same things the same forever.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody ever is expecting a Waffle House to be cleaned up to the point where it looks like a modern McDonald's and can be repurposed into a vape shop one day, right? That's not what you're getting at Waffle House. You know exactly what you're getting every single time you walk in. There's a bar there. You sit at a stool by yourself. If you're with a party, you can sit in one of the booths, or you're waiting. And you'll get your food eventually, and it'll be the same meal that you had when you were there 1984. Doesn't taste any different. And there's something to that, is all I'm saying.
Yeah. Keep the iconic.
Cole, I've really enjoyed this episode of the podcast. Thank you for coming on and filling in for Buzz. Is there anything else you wanted to share with our audience before we head out?
I mean, I'm sure your listenership will spike back up, once Buzz returns, but I appreciate those that are willing to listen to the lesser version of Buzz, the imitation. But it was an honor to play Buzz Brockway today, and always good to hang out with you, man. I've got a great We don't agree on everything, but I've got a
No.
great amount of respect for who you are, what you stand for, how you treat people. Even though you said some mean things about people today, that was uncharacteristic of you. But you
No, it's completely in line. If you listen to the podcast, there are certain people who
but you treat people well, and
you've got to go really far to get there, though. I mean, you got to go really far, and I'm not like that with everybody. It's just some people, they've pressed my buttons over the years.
Yeah.
But thank you again for being on. We, at this point in time of the podcast, every week, give homage and respect to the people who rock. These are the people who every single month reach in their pocket and they give us at least $5 to keep us going. If you want to join them, you can head on over to patreon.com/peachpundit. We have a new Patreon this week, Sergio Ortega. Thank you, Sergio, for signing up. Sam Thomas, Jordan Reed, Shannon Ferguson, Jeff Cobble, Hank Burnham, Ryan Purvis, James Hall, Colin Martin, Tony West and our friends at Americans for Prosperity, Robert Lee and our friends at Lee6 Media, Stuart Wilkinson, Ron Daniels, Mike Buchert, our anonymous Patreon who wants you to learn more about the Alzheimer's Association, Bo Brannon, Ryan Graham, John Vestal, Reed Powell, Brett Harrell, and our friends at Conservatives Concerned, Justin Wright, Bethany Ballard, Bill Werkheiser, Eric Johnson, Kenyatta Mitchell, and the aforementioned Sergio Ortega. Thank you again for listening to Peach Pundit the Podcast. Peach Pundit the Podcast is me, Scott Turner, Jason Pye, and Buzz Brockway, joined tonight by Cole Muzio of Frontline Policy. And all the music you hear is original by Jason Pye. Thank you for listening. We'll catch you next time.